Welcome to the MenTell Health Podcast. I'm Tim. I'd invite you to join me on my journey to talk about men's mental health. Before we begin, a brief disclaimer. I am in no shape or form a mental health professional. I am just a man who wants to get the ball rolling and other people to talk about men's mental health. In today's episode 13, the unlucky number, I want to talk about work. Ooh, who wants that? Or maybe you do, because there's lots of people that love their work, that enjoy their work, and there's other people that don't. And it doesn't really matter which side of the belief or which side you're on. But work has an impact on our lives because we spend quite a lot of our time there, and actually for the majority, men spend more time at work than other groups. Men spend so much time at work that they forget to look after themselves. Some men actually spend so much time at work that they die sooner, and sometimes even so much sooner that they don't even see themselves retire. But why is that? Why do men think work is so important? Or why do we think men should think that way? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Now, while there is a shift happening in our society, and we are questioning more and more our gender roles and what makes men men, what makes women women, and does there even need to be that clear-cut line? There are some firm and fundamental core beliefs that are very, very, very difficult to shake. And one of those core beliefs is that men need to prioritize work over everything, especially over their own health, and that men need to be the breadwinners, even if maybe at home they no longer are the breadwinner, because maybe their spouse earns more, and that they need to be successful, that defines their worth. They are only worth something to us if they are successful. And actually, the comedian Dave Chappelle, who has many, many faults and says many, many bad things, made a very good point once when he said that that children and women are valued for being them, but men are loved even for them. Men are loved for their achievements. And that is a belief that is still held. It shouldn't be true, and in some instances, finally, it is no longer true. But for many men and other groups, that is still a very firm held belief. Just look at dating websites or social media. There's under many men's side, you see that's their job. And some of the very first questions we ask someone is, well, what do you do? Because it defines us. And for men, it's not only the job that defines them quite often, but it's also the success. It's also that they are, winning at the game of who's best at their job and who's the most successful and who makes the most money. And it goes so far that quite a few, or the majority of men, are actually affected by the struggle they have of being the best and achieving success, statistically even more than women and other groups. But then again, that they seek less help for that. They seek less assistance, support, or even talk to their friends and family about it, because it might make them appear weak. And that is one thing that man cannot be weak in whichever aspect of their life. They're supposed to be good, they're supposed to be the best, they're supposed to be stable, stoic, strong, the rock that never falls. But of course they aren't, because just like everybody else, men also have feelings, men also struggle, and men crumble under pressure. As that's what pressure does. It tries to crumble you. and just not giving in doesn't always prove to be the best course of action. And whilst it's always been the case that men identify themselves with work, the whole idea of the 40-hour work week was established because men were the breadwinners that went to work, and women stayed at home and cleaned the house and took the role of the caretaker at home. And that worked when you could still afford to live that way. Nowadays we can't anymore. But that gave us that deep-rooted belief that men's only purpose in life is their job, because that's where they spend most of their time. But now, not only has society changed in that women also are at work, which creates a whole lot of problems in a private life, but this is not the topic of this episode. Will be one of the later one. But it also changed as in that something has become very dominant, and something that is shown as the ultima ratio to achieve, and that is hustle culture. Hustle culture is the idea that you, by working really, 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 really hard, you can become really, 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 really successful. And it is advocated by these really successful businessmen most of the time. But hustle culture is something that afflicts both men and women. There's also lots of women that hustle a lot to try to achieve the success in their career. But it is advocated by these very successful businessmen who portray this image that they work relentlessly, that they are constantly working. If they're not working on bettering their business life, they're working on improving and optimizing their private life. But everything they do is trying to achieve the optimum, and they work 70, 80, 90. Elon Musk even said he works 100 hours a week. There's very little relaxation, and if they relax, then they also use that to become even better. And these successful business people or businessmen are then held up as the ideal, and other people try to achieve the same. And not only that, they want that of themselves, but they also expect that of the people that work for them. You put in the extra hour and you achieve something, and you put in the extra weekend and the extra holiday that you don't take, just so you can become the next super rich person or the super successful person, whatever the definition works best for you. But this is bad for mental health, and I get there in a minute. But it also doesn't really show it doesn't show the true purpose of that, because obviously a very successful business person is encouraging the people that work for them to be super successful by working extra hard for them without extra pay, because that means they get more work or more labor out of them for less money. So yes, clearly, if for example a super rich person like Jeff Bezos tells his workers, well, I started small just like you and work my way up. If you just work hard enough for me, you get up here as well. Of course they will do that, because is the richest man on the planet. That before he even founded Amazon, he was a hedge fund manager that was already a billionaire. People kind of, I don't think, know much, or if any consider. And it doesn't work that way, because people, don't tend to share their wealth. So the super rich that encourage people to work extra hard and to hustle, they're going to stop them at some point, because otherwise it would mean that they're going to share their wealth, and they're not going to do that. So it's a bubble that's going to burst at some point for the people that work, and by the time sometimes years later, they will have lost quite a lot of their time with family and friends and for themselves, and also quite a lot of their health. Because what hustle culture does is it encourages you to prioritize everything, prioritize work over everything. And that means also your mental health. That means that you don't sleep enough sometimes, that you don't take the breaks that you need because you think If you take that break now, then someone else will overtake you, because it also makes you super, super competitive. Oh, that person that has the same job as me and, could be up for the promotion, they worked the weekend and I didn't. Also, I better make up for that and work the next 2 weekends so that they aren't seen as better than me. Because hustle culture only works if it's, competitive. It doesn't work if, you're not competing against someone else. And this belief of hustle culture that the only way to achieve true success is by self-sacrifice and by working those extra long hours and by neglecting your family, your friends, your personal life just for their work. And that's the only way you can be successful. Completely ignoring the fact that there's lots of inherited wealth that already levels people up that become super wealthy in the end. And there's actually very few that work their way up. And some of them are actually just lucky and not really, got there because of the super extra hard work. Some did, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen to everyone. And then believe that that's the only thing they can do. And then if they fail to do that, that puts pressure on them. But also if they feel guilty or they feel incredibly stressed but have no release valve because they also still believe. And work culture and hustle culture is, putting that on them, that any form of weakness is bad. Anything that shows that they cannot deal with the pressure is bad and will mean that they will not be successful. So the job they're giving everything for doesn't allow them to become healthy, to give more even. It's just, And in the past, all this belief that, you need to work super extra hours to become successful was seen as bad, and then a change happened and now it's seen as good. Just because these super, super, super rich people are becoming more public. They didn't used to be that public. And people are not encouraged to take time off because then, they miss out. And it's, in many instances, what does really, really, probably stop saying really, really, that stops a healthy relationship with work is this still very predominant macho culture at work. Not only are you encouraged to be the best and encouraged to, win and beat everybody else, but you're also encouraged to sabotage. You're also encouraged to talk bad about other people, use bad language, and treat each other very badly because everybody else is your competition. They're not your colleagues. They're not with this in you, but they are your competition. So when other groups of people ask for more money and strike, they're your competition, so you don't want them to, so you talk them down. And it's just this whole culture, what it does is it puts people against each other. It doesn't help each other, and especially men, because men are not encouraged to be teams unless they're in sport. But then even then, that one player, that's the one, what's his name, Messi. Nobody's better than Messi, and he should win the prize for the best footballer every year. And even though it's always a team, he doesn't win by himself all the time, but it's just him that gets the trophy as the best. So even if it's a team sport, people are picking out the individual as the one and the best man. And I'm sure also for women in women's sports. And it's an ever-going cycle, because you try to be better and you try to work harder, and it becomes super, super stressful. But then you don't take time off to become, to get better. So you get more stress. And then you look at other people, you look at social media, which is, terrible for hustle culture, because all you see is this glimpse where a person shows you, oh, I'm successful now, and I've worked 70, 80 hours this week, but I've made it. And you don't even know if it's true. They could just say this, or it might be true, but they may have cried whilst posting this social media post, or it's true for them, because some people can work 80 hours and it's fine for them and they're healthy and happy, but for many people that's not true. And if your firm belief is that you only are worth anything if you achieve this goal, and if you're better than the next person, and the next person posted on social media just now how they've worked for 80 hours and they're now living their dream, or their boss has told them you're doing a good job and if you continue to do that, I will promote you, and the colleague read that on social media and said, well, they didn't tell that to me, so I must be bad, even though I give my everything, so I must give more, then it's gonna really mess with your mental health. And people that were healthy before starting work can become very severely ill, and especially men that become ill and don't have a support system, or even are encouraged to talk about their mental health to their colleagues or their friends or their family. Because as I've mentioned in other episodes, for example, episode 12 from last week, if you haven't heard it, give it a listen. In our society, we still don't encourage men to talk about mental health, and we don't give an image of men talking about mental health as something positive, but rather as something negative, because any mental health issue is seen as a moral failing and as a weakness that can be attacked, that can be exploited by your hustle culture colleagues who are just out there to try to get you to find that weakness they can take advantage of to get your position and to get your job, and to beat you in that race. And that's not only does that lead to severe mental health issues that don't get treated, but obviously in order to cope with that stress, quite a lot of men start using drugs, start using hard and illegal drugs, or hard and illegal drugs, for example, alcohol, to cope with that. And then that can lead to very many different severe problems afterwards. And sometimes the stress then can lead to them losing their job because they can't keep up with that ridiculous workload, or because they can't keep up with the normal workload anymore because they've given everything and they haven't been able to take care of themselves, so they even perform less than they're supposed to, and maybe if that is even not as much, but still, and then they start losing their job. Then they lose their job, which then because then their purpose is gone, because for quite a lot of people, and especially quite a lot of men, the job is the purpose in life. That's what fulfills you. That's what you're supposed to do. And that you're supposed to get value and appreciation from, is gone, then your life is meaningless. And then you're not allowed to get help, or you're not encouraged to get help. So it's a cycle that's just very bad. And of course, things are changing, which is great. There's more awareness for mental health, and there's also more awareness for men's mental health. This podcast is evidence. But some of that change isn't really that good. Especially the change that is directed towards the managers and the bosses, how they're supposed to interact, to deal with the mental health of their employees. And lots of time, they're encouraged to open up to their workers, to their employees, and get them talking. But one of the ideas that is presented, and I read that in the Harvard Business Review, that's what it's called. I've put the link in the show notes or in the description below, depending which medium you use to listen and or watch this podcast. But they say, for example, they give advice, don't talk about mental health. Use words as in burnout. Use words as in you're stressed when talking about that. And yes, that's good, because, it picks people up where they're coming from, because lots of men feel very icky around these words. They feel, because these words are very connotated with the idea of this is weak and this is a failure if you have this, but burnout is something that happens. I mean, you work too hard, you burn out, man. That's what happens. But whilst that is good, what it does on the other hand, it continues to stigmatize the very serious problems of mental health that these people might have. Burnout, yes, that is a mental health problem, but is that really the only thing that's going on? Could there be more that you then don't encourage them to talk about? And why do you need a different word? Why not, destigmatize the words that we have that, describe what's actually going on, and that would then help other people in other groups as well to not be stigmatized, because by, giving men this, just talk about as a burnout or stress, but not really the actual mental health problem that you have. You take them away from the other groups that have them, and where it's allowed for them to talk about it, and you make them the less and the other again, and the men are over here by themselves again. So both of them are separated instead of bringing them together, which I think is a bad idea, and we should more rather work on getting rid of the stigma and using the words as words of, neutrality. This is just something that is there, and let's look at how we can deal with that in whatever shape or form that is, instead of trying to come up with words that sound more manly, which in itself feels like a ridiculous idea. But another aspect that is always put out there when mental health is discussed in the workplace for managers is, but look at, it might seem like something that just takes away time, but look at how much money it could save you in the long run, because those workers will be more happy, they will be able to work more, they will be able to increase the revenue, and you will save money in the end. And it's all only about money again. And yes, of course, business is about money. Yeah, sure, our economy only works because of money, but it also only works because of people. Take the people out of the economy, and you don't have the economy either. So why does everything always have to be for money? Why not just for the people? Because if you give the managers this idea, hey, look at their mental health, because it saves you money, then you don't encourage them to talk to them as people, you talk to them about as commodities. This is a commodity, and the commodity is not really working in the way it works, so let's fix it so it can make me money again. And then they can work again, they can work the 80 hours again. Instead of working on the system that is, killing people and really, really hurting them, they're just encouraged to tweak the system a tiny bit so it works again in favor for them to make more money. Because that's all that matters. It's just money instead of people. And in the end, what will help people that suffer is not money, it's people. Because as I've talked before in episode 7, rich people have mental health issues as well. They might be able to cope with them better and might be able to get the help they need, but the help they get is from people, not from more money, despite whatever they think does actually help them. It is most often not really money, it's people. And this is also something that really, God, I say really too often, don't I? That is something where men can learn from other communities, because the other communities do have a community. It's not about them versus the others. It is about them working together. And that's why there's so much, women in the workplace is a new idea still for some, even though it's been going on for over 100 years. And those women empower each other. They want each other to be successful, that all women can be successful. And that is great. I love that. Why can't men do that? And not with just being successful, but also by being healthy. Let's empower each other to be better, to be healthier, and to be better in our community. Because once you get rid of the idea that we men are just competing against each other at work, and also with women now, we don't have to put other people down. We can all be successful in whatever shape or form that means for us. And if we get rid of the idea that the only way to be successful is by being the super duper rich person, but by maybe everyone being, and this is going to sound communist, but I don't mean communism, although that, is also not the worst idea. But, there can be more wealthy people, there can be more less wealthy people, but by caring about the people, at least those people that aren't as wealthy aren't as bad off as they are now by being super poor. But by encouraging us men to be a community that lifts each other up in our health, that can also mean that we become more successful at work and be better at it. And, get that promotion, achieve that goal. Because what's happening at the moment, where these managers now come in, or the HR department comes in and tells people, hey, let's talk about your mental health. Lots of people still feel, and especially lots of men, feel like that's a trap, because some people actually have been trapped. They open up, and then either they've been, kind of like pushed aside because, well, you can't deal with the pressure because, you have a mental health problem that we asked you to talk about. So maybe we take that pressure away and you just go over there and do their less important job and basically just start going away. Or, it's a good idea. Let's talk about mental health. People actually start talking about mental health, and then it's like, oh, but we have no idea how to deal with this. So thanks for sharing, I guess, but let's just sweep it under the rug and forget about it. And that's pointless. That actually makes things worse, because you've shown them that, well, we'll listen, but we won't help because we can't help you and there's no help. So, maybe don't bother talking even. And then, everybody has, we've given everyone the opportunity to talk about their mental health. Nobody's been talking. Everyone seems happy. We're doing great. Let's continue that way. And that's not how it works. But of course, things don't happen overnight. Those beliefs are very deeply rooted, not just in the individual person, but in our society. And that doesn't change overnight. That doesn't change by me doing this podcast, this one episode. That doesn't change by anyone who listens to this one episode. It only works if we do it continuously and over a long period of time. But there's people hurting right now, and we need to help these people if we can. And as much as I don't like the idea of changing the language to help men in their mental health at the workplace, I do encourage an approach that works better with men. And men, to the degree that they have been socialized, don't really want to accept help because that shows weakness. But what they really love to do, and any woman who's ever been mansplained will know this, is to help. Even if it's sometimes not helpful, but men really love helping. Men really love solving problems and being, the person that someone can turn to and, be a support for someone else. So encouraging men in the workplace to be the support for someone else is a good place to start, because for one, hey, great, we have more people that are, that can support other people. But what also happens whenever you teach someone to help someone else, they quite often learn to see stuff in themselves. So if you teach someone, hey, this is to look out for when your mate shows these kind of symptoms, then there's a high likelihood they have a form of depression, and this is how you could help them. You could talk to them, you can open up to them, you can ask them how they are, you can give them opportunities, and so on and so forth. And then you hear that more often, and see that behavior in your friends, and sometimes, and quite often, you start saying, hey, hang on, I'm doing that too. Ooh, maybe there's something here. Maybe that's something I should look at. But it works that way because you don't push the idea of, hey, maybe something's wrong with you on them, but you give them the idea, hey, help your friend. Help someone else. Be helpful to someone else. Show them that, you can be the helper. And then they can help themselves. Or ask for the help because they now know that other people can provide it to them, or they know where to ask and because of what reason to ask. And I think that's a great approach. And by doing that and teaching men and other people, of course, as well, to look out for the signs, you don't have to change the language because you're not talking about them, you're talking about their friends. And then they get destigmatized for these words as well. And then, we can talk more openly using the language that's there for already, without othering others or othering men then by using a different language. But until then, if you would like to talk about your experiences or what's going on with you, either because you find me so pleasant and like me so much that you want to share, or because you have nobody else to turn to, you can always message me. There is an anonymous contact form on the website, men-tell-health.com, tell in Tell, or you can email me, tim@men-tell-health.com. mentelhealth.com, or go on Instagram, message me there, mentalhealth_podcast. Or if you're on YouTube, you can comment down below anything that we'd like to add, or like me to talk about more, or share your experiences. I would love to hear and to read from you. And this is it for this week. Thank you so much for listening and or watching, and I would be ever so grateful and appreciate it a lot if you could give this episode a rating, or this podcast a rating, a likes up, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends, family, or whoever you think could benefit from it. So as always, I hear and I see you, and I hope you hear and or see me again next week. Goodbye.